Omar was removed from a House committee, and I want to go through this because I have quite a bit to say. So here's the article from the BBC, right? Republicans have ousted Democrat Ilhan Omar from her committee post in a sign of escalating tension in the U.S. Congress. They voted to remove Ms. Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee over her past comments about Israel. Of course they fucking did. This is the land of the free, right? This is freedom of speech. But don't fucking say anything about Israel, you anti-Semite.
What is this nothing you
this
talk
is,
about?
you know...
Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious. Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious.
Yes, this is Richard Medhurst. And particularly for this segment, we'll be thinking about him unpacking Ilhan Omar. Richard Medhurst, he's an independent Christian journalist from Syria. He's also been on Press TV, which is Iranian's national news station. So here's Richard Medhurst with his take on Ilhan Omar's removal from the Foreign Affairs Committee.
This is pathetic, really. Republicans have said the move sent a strong statement against anti-Semitism. No, it didn't, because anti-Zionism has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. All Zionists are not necessarily Jews. Joe Biden himself has said on tape many times, "I'm a Zionist." Kamala Harris has spoken at AIPAC. You know, this is a political ideology. Zionism is a political ideology, and it's spouted by Christians, some people who think they're Christians, and then you have European settlers from Europe who are Jewish, and you have European settlers, Jewish settlers from other places as well. It's a colonialism. It's settler colonialism on occupied.
De-emotionalize this for a second. Let's try and intellectualize this for a second. Let's try and rationalize this for a second.
Yeah, let's think about that for a second. I'll go back just a bit. I'd like to hear him give his take on Christianity, Islam, and Judaism and their relationship with one another through the lens of Zionism.
Zionists are not necessarily Jews. Joe Biden himself has said on tape many times, "I'm a Zionist." Kamala Harris has spoken at AIPAC. You know, this is a political ideology. Zionism is a political ideology, and it's spouted by Christians, some people who think they're Christians.
I wonder if it's spouted by Muslims. You know, we can not rule out that there might be Zionist Muslims. That's something to ponder.
And then you have European settlers from Europe who are Jewish, and you have Jewish settlers from other places as well. It's a colonialism. It's settler colonialism on occupied Palestine. Nothing to do with Judaism. There are Jews, there are Arab Jews, and there have been Jews in the Middle East for thousands of years, just like you've had Muslims and Christians living side by side. This is absolutely, literally nothing to do with anti-Semitism. As a matter of fact, there are many, some of the most vocal voices against Zionism, against Israel in the West are Jews. I can just give you a couple examples. You have got Noam Chomsky, you got Norman Finkelstein, you've got Stanley Cohen, who he's a great friend, and he's been on the show many times. He's even banned from Israel because he really gave it to them. You got so many people who are against Israel who are Jewish themselves. So again, are they self-hating? I mean, apparently, according to these people. But Miko Peled is another very, very eminent figure, and I've had him on as well. So they want you to think that it's about that. It's not. But let me just get back to the story. So Democrats and Ms. Omar said it was revenge after 2 Republicans were ousted from committees in 2020 when Democrats held a House majority, right? Because now, after the midterms, the Republicans have the House. Ms. Omar also suggested she was being removed because she is a Muslim woman who immigrated to the U.S. as a refugee. Quote,
yeah, one of the things that I think he misses here, because he just made the point that, at least he's reading an article and he didn't clarify or state his position otherwise, is this idea that there's a right-left difference, and that the left is behind the right, or I'm sorry, the left is behind Omar in her stance on Israel. The left is probably even more supportive of Israel. So just thinking about that through the context of not only the United States and its government, but the government of the UK as well, we can see that the left is a big part of pro-Zionism.
But is anyone surprised
The whole notion of logic.
that I'm somehow deemed unworthy to speak about American foreign policy? She said shortly before the vote. She is one of 3 high-profile Dems to lose a committee assignment under the new House majority, which is led by Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Some Republicans, including McCarthy, argued that Ms. Omar should not serve on the powerful Foreign Affairs Committee owing to her past comments about Israel that have at times been criticized by members from both parties. Yeah, you know why? Because both parties support Israel. And they support
There
Israel
we go.
because it's an outpost for British and American imperialism. End of story.
You know what? I retract the prior statement, Mr. Medhurst.
Ms. Omar apologized in 2019 for implying money was behind support for Israel.
But you know what? Actually, I don't fully retract the statement, because the extent to which the parties are behind should be unpacked, and the extent to which the parties are not behind Ilhan Omar. I know we got a nice show just recently. I think I definitely did cover it, episode 1 or 2, of the speeches that some women in the House gave, including Rashida Tlaib. I don't think I played Cori Bush, but I've seen it in the past few days. But she had a rousing address to those who decided to remove Ilhan Omar from the FAC. So they seemed as though they were really, really fervent about Ilhan being removed, but that's not the case, as we'll see in a forthcoming article, that the left, in a way, created the environment for this to happen to Ilhan Omar. And so, thinking about that in the context, again, of UK issues with conflated anti-Semitism and the Labour Party by way of Jeremy Corbyn, is something else we'll think about.
Well, there's money behind U.S. support for everything. I mean, it's not specific to Israel, but Israel receives more U.S. aid than anyone else. So obviously there's money involved. These are fucking facts. They're numbers. You can quantify this. Obama gave Israel 38 billion over the span of 10 years. So every single year, $3.8 billion in military aid. Yes, there's money involved. It's not the only factor, but I don't know what they're hinting at. They're trying to say it's like some anti-Semitic trope. It's not. It's dude, there's a lot of money in the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of money involved in supporting Israel. End of story. That's just these are facts. They're quantifiable. Then Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi condemned Ms. Omar's comments as anti-Semitic as they invoked bigoted stereotypes about Jewish people using money for influence. I'm pretty sure that's not what she said, Ilhan Omar, and not what she was implying. They just don't want her because she criticized Israel. They know she doesn't hate Jews. She's not an anti-Semite. There's literally no evidence to support that. That's it. But again, she apologized, right? And if she apologized, and they still don't accept that, I mean, they're really just ganging up against her, right? If she was an anti-Semite, I tell you she's an anti-Semite, but she's not. So, we see time and time again how in the United States, in Britain, in Europe, if you speak out against Israel or Zionism, or even just you say you support the Palestinians, so you're not necessarily criticizing the Israelis, perhaps implicitly, but you suffer consequences because of that, right? So you saw Jeremy Corbyn, there was a huge witch hunt against him in the Labour Party. The guy's the fucking leader of the party, and they sabotaged him for many reasons, mainly because these are Blairites, They're practically like Democrats who are really just Republicans, and these are Labor who are really just Tories. They got rid of him because he's a true leftist. He's to the left of them on every issue, and he supports Palestinians, and he has protested against racism his whole life, and they still managed to call him a racist and get the whole media to call him a racist, and they made up rumors, they made up crazy shit. Go watch Al Jazeera Files, the Labor Files by Al Jazeera, the documentary. So, that's just another example of how if you support Palestinians, they will come for you. You saw in the United States, there's some places where, in some states, where if you don't sign a pledge refusing to condemn Israel, you lose your job, right? There was a Palestinian, I think she was Palestinian, there was a teacher who got fired because she refused to sign this pledge. And then they say, oh, freedom of speech. This is crazy, man. Really crazy.
Well, also, so there's a story that I may have to cover just to rekindle so that we get some more eyes on it. But there was a German news station who fired a gaggle of Muslim journalists and people who worked at the company, and they were taken to court, and their justification was the IHRA definition, and the justification was found to be legally unjustifiable, and the case was dropped. So I'll cover that as well, because that is definitely related to what we're thinking about here. Maybe today, towards the end in our log hour, our post hour.
Ms. Omar said in a statement at the time, anti-Semitism is real, and I'm grateful for Jewish allies and colleagues who are educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes. So let me just play you the video, okay? So this is a video of her speech. Let's take a listen, and then we'll get to the others.
This debate today, it's about who gets to be an American. What opinions do we have to have to be counted as Americans? This is what this debate is about, Madam Speaker. There is this idea that you are a suspect if you are an immigrant, or if you are from certain parts of the world, or a certain skin tone, or a Muslim. It is no accident that members of the Republican Party accused the first Black president, Barack Obama, of being a secret Muslim. It is no accident that former President Donald Trump led a birther movement that falsely claimed he was born in Kenya. Because to them, falsely labeling the first and only President of the United States of America a Muslim and African immigrant somehow made him less American.
Yeah, and let's add the Muslim ban to that list, right?
Well, I am Muslim. I am an immigrant, and interestingly, from Africa. Is anyone surprised that I am being targeted? Is anyone surprised that I am somehow deemed unworthy to speak about American foreign policy? Or that they see me as a powerful voice that needs to be silenced? Frankly, it is expected, because when you push power, power pushes back. Representation matters. Continuing to expand our ideas of who is American and who can partake in the American experiment is a good thing. I am an American who was sent here, by her constituents to represent them in Congress. A refugee who survived the horrors of a civil war, someone who spent her childhood in a refugee camp, someone who knows what it means to have a...
Right, so let me show you some of the other speeches that people gave in support of her, right? So and then I'll give you my comments. Okay, so this is Cori Bush.
Perspective. So let's talk about what's really happening. Republicans are waging a blatantly Islamophobic and racist attack on Congresswoman Omar. And I've said it before, I will say it again. The white supremacy happening is unbelievable. This is despicable. It is Congresswoman Omar who has been harassed at her job for simply existing as a Muslim woman in Congress. It is she who has been attacked by a member of this body, ridiculing her as a potential terrorist for simply existing as a Muslim woman in this Congress. So rather than bring an actual accountability, any accountability to Congress, they bring this offensive resolution to the floor. This is just a bunch of racist gaslighting. We all know it. Vote no. Perspective. So let's talk about what's really happening.
And of course, I left the best for last. We have AOC.
Was that was sarcastic, right?
Now-
Was that sarcastic? That was sarcasm? Or was he, I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Let's look at his eyes when he says this. Let's take a closer look.
Vote no. Perspective. So let's talk about what's really happening.
And of course,
Smirk.
I left the
Oh,
best for
no, 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 no.
We have AOC.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Gaslighting. We all know it. Vote no. Perspective. So let's talk about what's really happening.
And of course, I left the best for last. We have AOC.
Now, as a fellow New Yorker, I think one of the things that we should talk about here is also one of the disgusting legacies after 9/11 has been the targeting and racism against Muslim Americans throughout the United States of America, and this is an extension of that legacy. Consistency, there is nothing consistent with the Republican Party's continued attack except for the racism and incitement of violence against women of color in this body. I had a member of the Republican caucus threaten my life, and you all and the Republican caucus rewarded him with one of the most prestigious committee assignments in this Congress. Don't tell me this is about consistency. Don't tell me that this is about a condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks when you have a member of the Republican caucus who has talked about Jewish space lasers and an entire amount of tropes and also elevated her to some of the highest committee assignments in this body. This is about targeting women of color in the United States of America. Don't tell me, because I didn't get a single apology.
On Omar. In both cases, I don't necessarily know if that's the right thing to do. I don't think it's it's over. It's definitely overreaching. I mean, again, they're basically just kind of taking revenge on each other, right? Whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or it's Ilhan Omar, there's
Again, it's not as. This is the only qualm I have with Richard Medhurst's argument here is that it is not partisan, and we'll go into that in just a moment. I'd like to take a look at some Republican takes he's going to unpack here by way of Glenn Greenwald, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
screwing with each other, right? The Republicans and Democrats. But let me just play you the clip and then let me comment on what you said.
When it comes to Ilhan Omar, it seems as if the argument for removing her from the House Foreign Affairs Committee is similar to the argument that was made by Democrats for why you should be stripped from your committee positions, namely that not that she abused her power or engaged in ethical violations, but instead that she expressed views that a lot of people dislike. And I want to just show you, you probably already seen it, but for our audience, what Matt Gaetz said a few days ago in an interview about why he's at least not yet willing to support the campaign to remove Ilhan Omar from this committee, and I want to hear what your reaction to it is. So let's go ahead and show that.
Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell are dangerous to our country. They lied about intelligence.
And you know what? I think I have it in its entirety here.
Our intelligence agencies. She didn't say that Trump was a Russian agent based on information from a particular committee that was just totally bogus. The reason I think a lot of Republicans want to kick Ilhan Omar off of the Foreign Affairs Committee is because they don't like what she has to say.
So
and like I was just saying to you,
you believe she should have remained on that?
well,
Foreign Affairs
I'm
Committee?
undecided on that question because the Democrats moved the Overton window. And I do believe Speaker McCarthy deserves deference, and so I want to hear him out. But I am undecided as of tonight as to whether or not I would vote to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee, because it's one thing to do dangerous things to the country with intelligence. It's quite another to say, I don't like your viewpoint, and thus I want to remove you. I don't support that with DirecTV and Newsmax. I didn't support it when it was directed at my friend and colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it makes me uncomfortable that the case against Ilhan Omar, isn't being subjected to any due process.
Do you see any validity to that argument?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. There's a major difference. Number one, I was removed from all committees, not allowed to serve on any committee in the House of Representatives for so-called comments and things on Facebook or social media before I ever became a candidate for Congress. But Omar is quite a different case. All of her statements and views have been made as a sitting member of Congress, and that's where it poses a problem. And her stances and views towards Israel are dangerous, very dangerous for the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Dangerous.
Because that committee does deal with Israel.
What is this nothing
And
you
her
talk about?
support for
What is this nothing? What is this nothing? What is this nothing? What is this? What is this nothing you talk about?
What are you saying?
Hamas, her
Anything?
support for terrorist organizations that are against Israel is not the type of viewpoints, and that's not what we should see out of members of Congress for the United States sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And then the other difference is, guess what? Democrats can assign her to any other committee in the House of Representatives, just not the Foreign Affairs Committee. So it's a night and day difference between how they treated me and what we're doing with Ilhan Omar. And my friend Matt Gaetz, who I really like and admire, he's just wrong, but I will tell you, I'm pretty sure Matt Gaetz is going to be voting to remove Omar when we take that to the floor.
Could definitely be the case. Let me just probe a little bit more on that, because you did mention Ilhan Omar's views with respect to Israel. Regardless of one's views on Israel, Israel is a foreign country. It's not part of the United States. It's actually a foreign country. A lot of Israelis have better quality of life than a lot of our fellow citizens of the United States. Israel is a major recipient of enormous amounts of U.S. aid in the billions and billions and billions of dollars range that Obama signed with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Even if you support U.S. aid to Israel and can reconcile that with an America First ideology, which I want to talk about in a second, what that means, surely it has to be the prerogative of a member of Congress to be able to question whether that policy is the right one, or even to oppose it without being punished. Isn't that something that we want to foster in Congress and our country generally, which is the ability to express views that others disagree with without being punished for them?
Yeah, absolutely, but I don't think it should be views expressed through hatred or any type of negative feeling towards a country based on their identity. And that's the problem with Omar. It's one thing for her to say, we shouldn't be sending foreign aid or something like that, but that's not her views. Her views are negative. Her views are more anti-Israel because it's Israel, because of Palestine and the situation that lies there.
Your inconsistencies are. What is this nothing you talk about? Your inconsistent. What is this nothing you talk about? What is this nothing you talk about? What is this nothing you talk about?
About Palestine and what lies there. That's it. That's as far as she's going to go with that. Because every time she mentions Israel, I'm sure, she gets a kudos from her donors.
But it's not one of more freedom of speech with policy. So that's the clear difference. Ilhan Omar is also someone that supported bailing out criminal rioters, Antifa BLM rioters that were burning down American cities during the summer of 2020. And her daughter was involved with those riots on the ground. So, I mean, we can go further. We can talk about the fact that she married her brother, broke immigration laws, and
This is full on QAnon right here. I'm not going to be able to do this. I just wanted to make sure that we saw the original. But yeah, and we'll continue with Medhurst here because he has some salient comments about what she says.
not what we should.
What the hell is she smoking, man? Listen, I thought you're the...
And then the other difference is, guess what? Democrats can assign her to any other
What the hell is she smoking, man? Listen, I thought you're the land of the free. I thought you have freedom of speech. So why isn't she allowed to have an opinion about Israel? Why does she have to fall in line and agree with you? What does that mean? Oh, she's dangerous because she has to deal with Israel. Yeah, because you're giving all this fucking money to Israel, so obviously she's supposed to have an opinion on that. And again, she gave, Ilhan Omar voted to give Israel $3.8 billion. She voted to give them the money. She gave them the money. And she had an instrumental role in passing that bill. Again, if you want the exact, I'll give you, I covered this on the channel. Here's the exact bill. So this was bill number, so House Resolution 4373, right? July 28th, 2021. It's not even a year ago. Actually, it is more than a year ago now. But it's a year and a half ago. So again, this is ridiculous. Can you believe what she just said about like, oh, she supports Hamas? No, she doesn't. She supports Hamas? I've never heard that in my life. Like, anyone who doesn't like Israel say, oh, they like Hamas, right? Hamas. They can't even say it, the Israelis. But she said that Ilhan Omar supports Hamas. She does? I don't know. Also, what's wrong with supporting Hamas? Under international law, they're allowed to, first of all, they won an election. They were democratically elected by the people in Gaza. They have an international legal right to armed struggle. It's not my opinion.
Yes, and this is the point. And you can add to that list Hezbollah as well. Democratically elected. What are you going to do? Are you going to? Is it going to be another Ukraine? Or maybe even like a Syria, right? Where you remove one person, or maybe you could even say that the U.S. hegemony had something to do with Pakistan and having Imran Khan being placed into office. But is it going to be another one of those?
You can go and look up the Geneva Convention and the United Nations Charter. So I don't understand why they're not terrorist organizations unless the United States is concerned, because the United States is supporting Israel, but legally, internationally, they're not really. So what again, what does it have to do? Let's say she does support them, hypothetically, right? Why shouldn't she be on the Foreign Affairs Committee? You just don't like her opinion. That's it. She's not a danger to anyone. I mean, this is really what... Anyway, let me play the rest of the clip.
Committee in the House of Representatives. So that's the clear difference.
The situation there, she has no clue what she's talking about. Just like AOC has no goddamn clue what she's talking about. This is embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed for these people because they are elected members of Congress. They represent, they are representatives.
Yeah, and in my opinion, there's a bit of a conflation between the right does it, the left does it too. So every time the right does something, people look for the left to be doing the same thing, or vice versa. The left does something, people try to figure out whether or not the right has done the same thing. But at times, it's not even. This scenario, I would say, is a bit more even, though. In fact, it may be that the Democrats are even more liable, and here's why. Well, in fact, hold off on that just a moment. I'd like to get into, and I think he might have mentioned something about this, so let me not go too fast and go back to having him finish.
In the United States Congress, which is the most powerful and the richest country on earth, and the United States is the most is the country the most involved in foreign affairs. Negative, most of it, but to not know what's even going on there, this is so embarrassing. I've seen this often where people run for Congress. I'm not saying her, but like there are people who run for Congress or the Senate in the United States, and you go to their website and they don't even have a foreign policy section. So these are people who could be voting on invading another country. Again, it doesn't mean it's legal, but they are supposed to have an opinion, and they're supposed to legislate on arms shipments and coups, and they get intelligence briefs, right? Most of them. So and depending on the committees they have access to classified information, and they don't even understand basic foreign policy issues like what's happening in occupied Palestine. This is disgusting. It's so embarrassing. So I love Glenn's question because he really cornered her, and this is something that is so funny that you see with Republicans and especially Trump people who are like, make America great again and America first. And he asked her, how do you reconcile America first with giving Israel all this money? Because obviously then America is not first. I'm pretty sure you could find a better use of $38 billion, which is what Obama gave Israel, for things inside the United States. There are tons of homeless people in the United States. People in the United States, as Glenn eloquently pointed out, don't have the same living standard as Israelis. How do you reconcile that? You can't. You can't reconcile the two because they're opposed to each other. It's a complete juxtaposition which they don't want to admit to, and she doesn't even address it because she doesn't have an answer. And if you ask Trump, he also wouldn't have an answer. So that was excellent from Glenn. I'm really glad he asked that. And by the way, Glenn is Jewish, so by the Israelis, in the Israelis' opinion, he's probably a self-hating Jew, right? This is so disgusting how they just attack anyone who criticizes Israel, which I've seen them do with Miko Pellet, with Stanley Cohen, with Norman Finkelstein. It's always the same thing, right? Like they always find an excuse to kind of destroy someone's reputation or attack them, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, right? It's like, just shut your mouth. And I think with Ilhan Omar, that's really what happened. She just, even if she gave the money, like you can tell that, she kind of just gave in and she learned her lesson, so to speak, and she shut her mouth. She never spoke really much about Israel and Palestine again, and she voted to give them the money. The vote is worth more than anything because you can talk all you want, but when you go to the House floor and you put, so to speak, mark your ballot on giving billions of dollars to Israel, that's it. I know exactly where you stand. She did that. That's a fact. You can look it up. I gave you the House resolution number. This was July 2021. Ilhan Omar gave Israel billions of dollars, and they went after her now and got her because these parties like to take jabs at each other. Democrats did it to Republicans. Republicans are doing it to Democrats. But they didn't forget. They didn't forget about what she said and her earlier criticisms. And I think AOC has learned her.
Yeah, so there we have it. And then we think about this again from a British perspective. This is an article in the Electronic Intifada, and it's entitled Face the Facts, Corbyn Surrendered to Israel Smears. Early this year, Al Jazeera's 4-part series, The Labor Files, Richard mentioned this, exposed plotting by right-wing staff in Britain's Labour Party to undermine Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and smash the party's left. The expose relied on private, I'll make this a bit bigger, relied on, sorry, hold on just a moment. Yeah, the expose relied on private correspondence unearthed in what's said to be the largest data leak in British political history. After the series was broadcast, a conspiracy of silence gripped the media. Both liberal and right-wing newspapers, which had shrieked on the front pages daily for 4 years about anti-Semitism in labor, pretended that the new evidence disproving this narrative didn't exist. The sum total of British mainstream press coverage about the program and its revelations appears to be one article in the far-right Daily Express and one opinion piece in The Independent by an activist in the party's youth wing. A single Guardian column on Labour Party Islamophobia briefly mentioned the series in its penultimate paragraph. Matt Frey, host of a phone-in show on the radio station LBC, even cut off a caller who referred to the series. Al Jazeera's revelations were met with a predictable outcry on social media from Corbyn loyalists. They cited the leaks as yet more evidence that they'd been stitched up by hostile right-wing forces. Yet the story lies elsewhere. The new evidence makes it all the more apparent that Corbyn's office played a major role in ramping up anti-Semitism smears, which targeted pro-Palestine labor activists, his own supporters. Now that's pretty deleterious. The new evidence makes it all the more apparent that Corbyn's office played a role in ramping up anti-Semitism smears. And, Luciana Berger, Ruth Smith, all those people who were, claiming explicitly and that in high numbers anti-Semitism was happening. Those are the people that we should be questioning right now. And don't serve the right-wing press. Ian McNichol, who served as Labor's general secretary for most of Corbyn's leadership, is firmly on the party's right and appeared to go out of his way to undermine Corbyn during his tenure. But McNichol also been maligned by influential advisors around Corbyn who sought to hide behind their supposed social credentials in order to advance the anti-Semitism witch hunt against pro-Palestine labor members, all this while deflecting blame exclusively to right-wingers inside the labor bureaucracy. John Landsman, probably the most influential of all Corbyn's advisors, was not shy about expressing sympathy with the settler colonialist state of Israel and its genocidal ideology, Zionism. Landsman argued that McNichol and his staff purposely delayed action on anti-Semitism complaints in order to make Corbyn look ineffective at dealing with the issue. There's another bomb. Landsman argued that McNichol and his staff purposely delayed action on anti-Semitism complaints in order to make Corbyn look ineffective. Whoa. In the Labor Files, this viewpoint is implicitly supported by Alex Nunes, an author on Corbyn's former speechwriter who claims that factionalism within the Labor Party was endemic and so pronounced that it was actually disrupting the Labor Party's ability to deal with, for example, anti-Semitism cases. The series presents a letter dated 21 February 2018 from Corbyn to McNichol. Corbyn expressed his concerns regarding the party's processes for dealing with complaints of anti-Semitism, and with his irritation that the current processes are far too slow to meet the volume of disciplinary cases the party has to deal with. Corbyn was also alarmed that more staff were not being hired to deal with anti-Semitism complaints. In a draft response, McNichol rebuffed Corbyn, informing him that over half of the anti-Semitism complaints relate to non-members and therefore are not a matter for the complaints team. McNichol also asked Corbyn to be mindful that feeding into the narrative about the party's complaints processes would serve only those in the right-wing press. One way to interpret this a la Landsman is that McNichol plotted to damage the left by leaving anti-Semitism cases unresolved. However, what this really shows is that the party's right-wing bureaucracy was more invested in undermining the left by other means. One such example was McNichol's expulsion machine during the 2016 leadership election, which was triggered by a vote of no confidence in Corbyn by right-wing Labour MPs. The purge may have affected more than 11,000 parties, the number the Labour files said were identified as needing to be investigated. These disciplinary proceedings, which saw many left-wing members suspended for years, were principally based on remarks about anti-Corbyn Labour MPs, not anti-Semitism. Other efforts to assault the party's left came in the form of shutting down local constituency parties. And it's almost as if this word is wielded in order to shut people's minds off. So this idea that the purge may have affected more than 11,000 party members, and that the disciplinary proceedings, which saw left-wing members suspended for years, they were principally based on remarks that had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. So after the muck and the mudslinging happened, based in anti-Semitism, and the proceedings began to happen that would determine whether or not Labour Party members would stay, all of the accusations of anti-Semitism disappeared, and the accusations became related to Labour MPs. Other efforts to assault the party's left came in the form of shutting down local constituency parties. The Labour Party's local group in Wallasey, near Liverpool, was suspended for over a year after false allegations about homophobic abuse that was supposedly directed towards the area's member of Parliament MP Angela Eagle. Moreover, the Labour group in Brighton and Hove was suspended for several months after fabricating claims of abuse and spitting at a local meeting. Although right-wing pro-Israel zealots were chiefly responsible for pushing the anti-Semitism smear campaign during Corbyn's leadership, it seems McNichol and his staff were more inclined to focus on alternative methods of attacking the left. Corbyn's self-sabotage. Embryonic anti-Semitism smears had plagued Corbyn after he made it onto the ballot paper in the 2015 leadership election, but the calumnies initially struggled to gain traction. However, in February 2016, a manufactured scandal at the Oxford Labour Club emerged following its endorsement of Israeli Apartheid Week, a series of Palestine solidarity events held annually by students in many countries. The scandal led to the resignation of one of the club's co-chairs, Alex Chalmers. Chalmers had previously worked as an intern with the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Center, a lobby group. Instead of examining the veracity of these bogus anti-Semitism allegations, Corbyn flinched. Janet Royal, a Labour member in the unelected House of Lords, was asked to conduct an inquiry from the matter. Given the febrile atmosphere that was being fomented, Royal was a curious choice, not least because she had visited Israel and the occupied West Bank in 2007 as part of a delegation from the pressure group Labour Friends of Israel. The OULC debacle evidently gave impetus to pro-Israel militants across Britain, who soon began trawling social media posts of those close to Corbyn to find ways to attack the Labour leader by proxy. The first high-profile target was Naz Shah, over a couple of innocuous Facebook posts about Israel that were in no way hostile to Jews. Nevertheless, Corbyn wilted under pressure and allowed Shah to be suspended. Shah later made a groveling apology in the House of Commons. Former London mayor and longtime Corbyn ally Ken Livingstone was also in the Israel lobby's crosshairs after publicly defending Shah. The pretext for the assault on him came when he made a historically accurate comment about the 1993 Havara Agreement. This was an accord between the Zionist movement and Nazi Germany. Livingstone was then subject to an aggressive ambush in front of TV cameras by the then Labour MP John Mann, who has a long history of vociferous pro-Israel activism. On the same day Livingstone was suspended, it was reportedly Corbyn himself who initially demanded Livingstone's suspension, even recommending disciplinary action against his former ally over subsequent comments. Mark Wadsworth, here's a big one, a veteran anti-racist campaigner, author and journalist, was another Corbyn supporter and friend to be attacked. The pretext for targeting him was his intervention at the 2016 press conference, launching Shami Chakrabarty's report into anti-Semitism and other forms of racism in Labour. Wadsworth has said that the anti-Corbyn and pro-Israel MP Ruth Smith, there she is, had been working hand-in-hand with the Daily Telegraph journalist. This led to accusations that he was engaging in anti-Semitic slurs about Jews controlling the media. Wadsworth was unaware that Smith was Jewish, but even though the accusations were plainly preposterous, he was suspended and later expelled. Jeremy Corbyn didn't look after me, Wadsworth states weekly in Al Jazeera's Labour Files. He threw me under the bus. Corbyn's team, Wadsworth claims, were desperate to get into number 10, a reference to the Prime Minister's residence on London's Downing Street. What can be seen from these examples is that while Corbyn and his staff acted impulsively and aggressively to discipline their own allies, Ian McNichol was more reluctant to lean into the anti-Semitism crisis. In April 2018, when Corbyn ally Jenny Formby replaced McNichol, she ratcheted up the campaign against party members, bringing in more staff to deal with anti-Semitism cases. It was considered an improvement in Labour's processes that more members were being investigated, suspended, and expelled. Under McNichol, only 44 anti-Semitism cases were brought to the party's National Executive Committee. By contrast, Formby brought 379 cases before the NEC, even though her tenure was considerably shorter. That is amazing. That is amazing. So, McNichol, 44 anti-Semitism cases brought to the party's National Executive Committee. Too many. But, okay. Formby brought 379 before the National Executive Committee. She oversaw a huge expansion of the disciplinary process, even though 23% of all anti-Semitism allegations during the whole Corbyn era originated from a single complainant, and 12% were from the Zionist group Labor Against Anti-Semitism. Again, this conflation of Zionist and anti-Semitism, an organization with a name like that, might encourage it. It seems that Formby was building structures to better accommodate the spray and pray Zionist mudslinging operation. Whatever her motivation, she certainly lit a fire under the smear campaign. Alongside the increased attacks against pro-Palestinian activists, Corbyn's staff were prepared to legitimize Zionism and pro-Israel discourse. The most formative battle occurred in the summer of 2018 over whether to adopt the illustrative examples that accompany the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. And this is preposterous. This is full-on preposterous that one could think that this definition is okay. The move was being pushed by pro-Israel MPs including Luciana Berger and Margaret Hodge, as well as a litany of British Zionist groups. Alarm bells were raised about the problematic nature of the examples, which conflate anti-Zionist beliefs in opposition to the Israel regime with hatred of Jews. For example, it was argued that IHRA definition would curtail discussion on the Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948, in which up to 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homeland by Zionist terror gangs. In spite of protests and warnings from Palestine and Palestinians, pro-Palestine activists, and anti-Zionist Jews, Labor's NEC still adopted the IHRA examples. The move was backed by many of Corbyn's staff and a large number of his allies. In the Al Jazeera series, James Schneider, Corbyn's strategic communications director, said it was politically impossible to avoid adopting the IHRA examples. In his recent memoir, former Corbyn advisor Andrew Murray has a similar claim. It was an expedient to make a fight over the issue. I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to retrieve some data here, because there is something related to that I was holding off on, but I think it's more appropriate at this moment. So, Okay, so this is one that I was really interested in, and it's totally related and pretty much exactly along the same lines of what we were just discussing, this concept of the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism and its inaccuracy. So New Jersey Palestine Solidarity organizations have released a petition calling on New Jersey legislators and all New Jersey citizens to reject a new joint resolution pending in both houses of the New Jersey State Legislature. The resolution resolves that New Jersey adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which falsely conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. So I think that that's the new super progressive language that like gets to the point, and I feel like the technological age has ushered that along pretty quickly, that the conflation of Zionism and anti-Semitism is the most precise way of eradicating, at least from a linguistic standpoint, the power that Israel and Zionists create when they try to conflate Judaism with Israelism and with Zionism or even Jewishness, any of those, or Semitism. So even at face value, the resolution is unjustifiable. Resurgent white nationalist anti-Semitism notwithstanding, Jews are neither exceptional victims of racism in this country, nor are they subject as Jews to any of the systemic state violence and oppression inflicted on other communities. Existing anti-discrimination and hate crime laws already apply to us as Jews, it seems. How can we defend any resolution or law that bestows special attention and protections on one group alone? But as the petition notes, this resolution is not truly about defining anti-Semitism and protecting Jewish people to begin with. It's about employing the authority of the state through the IHRA definition to slander and silence the growing Palestine solidarity movement. The apartheid Israel regime was founded in 1948 through an open-ended campaign of ethnic cleansing, dispossession, Nakba catastrophe, drive out the indigenous Palestinian majority for 75 years, and continuing, and counting. The regime has denied Palestine or Palestinian Nakba refugees their inalienable rights to return to their homes and homeland. More than 65 discriminatory laws codify Jewish supremacy. Throughout history, or historic Palestine, including the 2018 nation-state law, in regard to which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu infamously declared, Israel is not a state of all of its citizens. Israel is a nation-state of the Jewish people, and only it. Unable to refute or answer for these facts, Israel's enablers have seized on the IHRA definition, in the words of advocacy group and petition endorsers, Palestine Legal, as a tool to censor political debate by tarring those who support Palestinian rights as anti-Jewish. The IHRA crusade emanates from the highest levels of the U.S. government, which relies on and heavily arms Israel as an outpost for U.S. imperial interests in the region. The State Department endorses IHRA on its website. In 2019, Donald Trump, whose casual anti-Semitism stopped neither Jewish Zionists voting for him in significant numbers, nor Israelis from extolling him as the best friend Israel has ever had in the White House. I've heard the nickname Zion Dawn. Zion Dawn. Although sustained, actually, let me go back a sentence here. In 2019, Trump, whose casual anti-Semitism stopped neither Jewish Zionists voting for him in significant numbers nor Israelis from extolling him as the best friend Israel has ever had in the White House, issued an executive order on combating anti-Semitism, while the working definition with the working definition of the IHRA at its center. So that ushered that into U.S. soil, and it's invalid. Although sustained pushback from civil rights and Palestine solidarity organizations recently helped defeat Zionist efforts to pressure the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to officially adopt the IHRA definition on February 2nd, New Jersey Representative and vocal IHRA supporter Josh Gottheimer, along with 31 bipartisan co-sponsors, introduced a resolution in Congress, House Resolution 92, specifically condemning anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Israel sentiment. So there's a conflation of Semitism and Israel, as if, and I'll pause on that because there's something more a bit later that I want to unpack with that idea. The drive to embed IHRA works in tandem with the lawfare assault on the Palestinian-led movement for BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. This includes the passage of anti-BDS legislation in 34 states. It also echoes right-wing calls to muscle critical race theory, the anti-BDS and anti-CRT offensives, writes journalist Abe Asher.
Your inconsistencies are we have the evidence. No, we have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
The Zionist establishment's witch hunt against anti-Zionists, many of them Jewish, ignores the real source of anti-Semitism, white nationalism. It also distracts from the growing alliance between Zionists and white nationalists over shared Islamophobic, ethno-supremacist, and social Darwinist fixations. This is a great paragraph, and is very true in a lot of ways. Let's go through that again. The Zionist establishment's witch hunt against anti-Zionists, many of them Jewish, ignores the real source of anti-Semitism, which is white nationalism, so-called white nationalism. It also distracts from the growing alliance between Zionists and so-called white nationalists over shared Islamophobic. The nationalist part is not the so-called part, it's the white part. Islamophobic, ethno-supremacist, and social Darwinist fixations. The bond is no aberration. The Zionist movement has always been rooted in the ideologies of racial separation and 19th century blood and soil nationalism that are at the core of white supremacist anti-Semitism. Today, the Israeli regime has forged close ties with pro-Israel anti-Semites, from Trump to Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro to Hungarian Prime Minister and Putin ally Viktor Orban, while neo-Nazi and self-declared white nationalists, white Zionists, so-called white Zionists, Richard B. Spencer calls Israel the most important ethno-state he looks to for guidance on this, or for guidance, period. On this, the authors of AJR 211, SJR 113, and the IHRA working definition are silent. If Jewish people in the United States are not exceptional victims of racism, we are exceptional, well-positioned to expose and confront the campaign to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. That's one of the most important contributions we can make to the struggle for a free Palestine and to the fight against anti-Semitism. In that spirit, Jews for Palestine's right of return calls on all supporters of justice and Jewish people, in particular, to sign the petition below and share it widely. So nice, there's a petition related to it, right? See if there's anything that is... It's not that extensive, so we pretty much covered it. I like this. I'll allow the... Yep, so we're going to load up again. Give me just a moment.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
Okay, here's one more. A German court rules Palestinians ex-DW journalist sacking unlawful. So Farah Moraka was dismissed along with 6 other Arab employees of Deutsche Welle after being accused of anti-Semitism. Deutsche Welle has already lost one case brought forward by Maryam Salem, who was also accused of anti-Semitism. A German court has ruled that the dismissal of Palestinian journalist Farah Moraka by the German state-owned broadcaster Deutsche Welle on charges of anti-Semitism was legally unjustified. Moraka's lawyer, Hauck Rinsdorf, told Al Jazeera that the court on Monday had ordered Deutsche Welle to reinstate Moraka. It's not just a relief for Farah in the difficult situation Deutsche Welle brought her into, but also a proof for the strength of the rule of the law. Rinsdorf said, "One may see this as an important step to restore Farah's reputation as a journalist. It's a relief that the judge ruled in favor of Farah and held Deutsche Welle accountable for this illegal dismissal." Giovanni Facina, director of the ELC, which advocates for the legal rights of Palestinians in Europe, said on Monday in a statement shared with Al Jazeera, "We hope this sends a clear message that they should stop the censorship practices," and said Facina, adding that pushing back, including 3 legal actions, is effective and it's necessary, and it is a necessity in order to uphold these rights. Moraka was fired along with 6 Arab employees of DW last February. Moraka sued DW, and in July, based on the recommendation of her lawyer, the court said that both parties had to release a joint statement in an effort to rehabilitate Moraka's reputation. The charges against Moraka arose after an external inquiry that scoured previous articles and social media posts of the former employees, who all are Palestinian or Lebanese, and based its findings on the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's controversial extended definition of anti-Semitism. And this extended definition of anti-Semitism is controversial because a lot of it conflates pro-Palestinianism or even pro-Islam with anti-Semitism. Very interesting. So the definition, which has been adopted by Germany, has been criticized as a means of silencing pro-Palestinian support and dissent against Israeli policies. The ELC, a non-governmental organization which provides legal assistance to associations, human rights groups, and pro-Palestinian individuals and organizations in Europe, had said earlier that it was brave and important that Moraka had challenged her termination. This case is illustrative of a worrying trend in Germany of institutionalized silencing of Palestinian voices and narratives by employing malicious practices. ELSC told Al Jazeera, "It depicts how the anti-Palestinian sentiment and the institutional use of the IHRA definition can lead to severe infringements upon the freedom of expression and freedom of the press." The DW commissioned inquiry into Moraka and her co-accused colleagues was led by former German minister Sabine Luther Schnarrenberger and Ahmad Mansour, a Palestinian German psychologist known for his pro-Israel views. Mansour says he's an expert on Islamic or Muslim radicalization and has been accused of Islamophobia. However, a separate investigation conducted by Euromed Monitor found that Moraka's article in question had been taken out of context and that the inquiry itself contained several instances of embracing a pro-Israel narrative against Palestinians. According to ELSC, the adoption of the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism represents a worrying trend of an institutionalized silencing of Palestinian voices and narratives. This is resulting in restrictive and punitive policies against advocates for Palestinian rights, such as lengthy disciplinary proceedings, denial use of public spaces, cuts in public funding, and exclusion from public events and debates, said Facina. Moreover, the IHRA has a much wider chilling effect on the right to freedom of expression by instigating a culture of fear and self-censorship that preempts free and democratic debate about the state of Israel and the Palestinian people among society at large, she said. Unlawful termination. A former colleague of Moraka, Maryam Salem, had already won her case against TW for unlawful termination. On July 6, a court ruled that Salem's dismissal was illegal and said her Facebook posts were not anti-Semitic. One moment. One of the posts in question had called out the limits of freedom or expression in Europe when it comes to talking about Palestine. That was very important for the judge to say, as it was very relieving for Miriam, her lawyer Ahmed Abed told Al Jazeera. In the aftermath of the court's decision in July, Abed released a statement where Salem called on DW to take responsibility, publicly apologize, and retract the allegations. DW will have until mid-September to appeal the court's decision. It didn't respond to requests for comments by the time of the publication. So here we have, in another country, this definition of IHRA, this definition by IHRA being taken through the proverbial ringer because it's invalid. It's invalid. What is a Semite? We'll talk about that actually in our post. Yeah, so there we have it. And there's one more electronic intifada article that I'd like to go over. This is from 2020, April 2020. But the ideas about the Labor Party being sabotaged through veiled claims of anti-Semitism is explained well here. So Ian McNichol and Jenny Formby, the two general secretaries that presided during Jeremy Corbyn's tenure as labor leader, McNichol oversaw a hyper-factional atmosphere against Corbyn at party headquarters, while Formby's staff boasted of disciplining more members than even before. A leaked international report or internal report shows that UK Labour Party's bureaucrats conspired to undermine their own leader Jeremy Corbyn from the start, even sabotaging the 2017 general election campaign. It also reveals how Labour's left-wing leaders came to embrace the right's witch hunt against members over the manufactured anti-Semitism crisis. The document shows that right-wingers at Labour headquarters, led by former General Secretary Ian McNichol, orchestrated a hyper-factional atmosphere against Corbyn. This report describes a purge of Corbyn-supporting members. You can read pages from the leaked document below. Keir Starmer, Labour's new right-wing leader, on Tuesday announced investigation into who leaked the document. The content and the release of the report into the public domain raise a number of matters of serious concern. From the moment Corbyn first won the leadership in 2015, the report shows left-wing members were obsessively demonized as trots, slang for a faction of communists. Many were expelled or suspended on flimsy pretexts, including false accusations of anti-Semitism. One senior Labour press officer privately described Corbyn as that effing trot and said that some MPs who nominated him for leader deserved to be taken out and shot. A Labour staffer described the atmosphere at headquarters. Everyone's much more right-wing and considers anyone to the left of former Prime Minister Gordon Brown to be a trot. The international sabotage of Corbyn included budgeting $280,000 for secret key seats, projected allegedly intended to funnel additional resources into seats of key figures on the right of the party. This confirms what the Electronic Intifada reported at the time. Labour Party headquarters had funneled campaign resources away from seats being contested by pro-Corbyn candidates and towards so-called moderates. Pro-Israel figures were prominent among the party's right-wing candidates, including Labour Friends of Israel and the Jewish Labour Movement's then chairs John Ryan and Jeremy Newmark. The report doesn't mention these candidates by name, however. Ryan worked to undermine Corbyn, despite misgivings about the Labour leadership. Ryan wrote to her constituents, "I hope that you'll consider voting for me as your local MP." Yet, despite such efforts, Corbyn did much better than expected, giving Labour its best results for years and denying the ruling Conservative Party a majority. The leak shows that one senior Labour staffer was furious at voters The people have spoken, bastards. The leaked internal report concludes there was no evidence Labor staffers had been motivated by anti-Semitism or that complaints about anti-Semitism were treated differently from others. But it also reveals the extent to which Corbyn, in support of Party General Secretary Jenny Formby, conceded the ground to the Israel lobby and the false narrative of rampant labor anti-Semitism. After Corbyn, a lifelong Palestine solidarity campaigner, became leader in 2015, pro-Israel groups relentlessly attacked him and his supporters as anti-Semite or anti-Semitic. This defamation campaign ultimately succeeded. The crisis was a top focus during the 2019 general election, and polling showed that Corbyn's mishandling of it was one of the top 5 reasons for voters not supporting Labor. The Israel lobby declared victory, with one group claiming to have slaughtered Corbyn. Israel lobby. Despite all this and the misleading nature of most of these attacks, Corbyn, to his own ruin, embraced the very same groups that were promoting the crisis lies. The report came to light on Sunday in stories by Sky News. Yeah, it's just, it's a smear. That's what that is. Full-on smear. Just a moment. Loading. There's all these different takes on, the conflation of anti-Semitism with Zionism, and through the lens of Ilhan Omar, a lot of people who pay attention to the U.S. government are aware of the happenings, but we don't get to hear Omar's voice as often as we should. Yeah. Especially, when she's brought up so much. She should be able to speak for herself, and she does. So, if people want to continue to bring her name up, then we'll continue to look to hear her as well.
President Joe Biden's first State of the Union address, he had Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sitting behind him on the dais, with Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. And tonight she's agreed to join me on the show in her first national interview since that vote. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, welcome back to the show. Let me start by asking you this. You made comments in 2019 about money in politics that were seen as anti-Semitic tropes. You apologized for them. You said you've learned, you've grown. But there are Republicans who have said much worse stuff, openly bigoted stuff, have yet to apologize, but they're still on their committees and you're not. How much do you think the targeting of you last week had to do with your identity? And how much to do with your views, specifically your criticisms of Israel that Speaker McCarthy openly singled out?
Well, Mehdi, it's great to be with you. It precisely has to do with bigotry. If you remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene herself in 2019 came to Congress and said she was going to force Rashida and I to get sworn in on the Bible because we certainly could not be official unless we did so. She talked about how we were infiltrating Congress as Muslims. You remember Trump coming to Minnesota and saying Somalis were infiltrating your state.
Yes.
These are people who certainly don't believe Muslim immigrants, Somali immigrants, refugees, and certainly someone who carries all of those identities together should be in the United States, let alone in Congress, and wield any kind of power. But it's also something deeper, right? It is this bigoted idea that they hold on who should have access to the legal system to seek justice. They don't believe Muslims or Black people should have equal access here in the United States to our legal system, and they certainly don't believe, Palestinians and others who are wronged, whether it is Iraqis or Afghanis, that are wronged by our foreign policy or the policies in Israel, should have access to international law.
Here at TR, we love the term access, right? As it relates to, just period. When you think about this term access, I think that's one of those words that's going to continue to come up. So,
international law to seek justice. I have brought about these concerns in that committee. I've spoken about the injustices that are out there that are being done in our name with our tax dollars, and why it is important to have a voice on that committee to be asking those kind of questions. And you've heard Republicans like Matt Gaetz who have said, this is the reason they want to take Ilhan off the committee, because she asks the kind of questions no one expects any member of Congress to be asking, let alone somebody who looks like her.
And Matt Gaetz, we'll see a bit more. We'll see a bit from Matt Gaetz today.
Yeah, what happened to the party of free speech when they say we can't have Ilhan Omar saying things we don't like on the Foreign Affairs Committee? I know you have to have a lot of security. You shared audio on your Twitter feed recently of a death threat that you received.
Country, you put a bullet in your head and get the out of my country. You I'll kill you.
Horrific, disgusting, scary stuff. I have to ask, how
you hear
that warning?
I'll put a bullet in your head and get the out of my country. You I'll kill you.
Horrific, disgusting, scary stuff. I have to ask, how much do you blame people like Speaker McCarthy and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and others for these kind of threats that you constantly get?
Yeah, it was one of the reasons Marjorie Taylor Greene was taken off her committees. It's inciting violence and threatening the lives and co-signing rhetoric like this. I certainly blame Trump, who put a target on my back, and McCarthy, who, for some odd reason keeps saying that I am somehow a security threat when, his caucus is full of people who incited an insurrection, supported an insurrection, who certainly are a threat to our democracy and our republic. These people don't really understand the weight that their language carries. They have no remorse. And I think, frankly, many of them might actually be happy if one of these people were to carry out these kind of threats. A lot of people would say it's your beliefs, it is what you say, it's the policies you push for. But if you listen to almost every single voicemail that I get, every single hate-filled, threatening voicemail I get is always rooted in my actual identity, where I came from, my country of birth. It's rooted in the faith that I practice visibly and proudly, and it's certainly rooted in my skin color and my ethnicity. So it is not. I would love for people to disagree and debate me on the policies that I believe in bringing forth, how I think our country can do better, I think we can do better for the world. But certainly these people are not interested in debating me on any of those things. They are interested in shutting me down because they don't believe somebody who looks like me should have an opinion here in this country or should be in this country.
Yeah, and the more that these people feel indignant and feel as though that they are able to do this, the more valid Ilhan Omar being in office is. So the more they exploit, the more they harass her, the more that they deny that they are not in favor of her because of who she is, the more powerful she becomes. And this is the Obama butterfly effect. You know, so fine. We have someone who is, you know, revolutionary in holding a position, and then we have a reaction to that. And this is that reaction. You know? So then we have a counter reaction to that, and that's her presence and other people's presences or presence like her or like hers.
Do you believe the leader of your party, the President of the United States, has your back, has had your back as you've been targeted and demonized and threatened?
I've heard the spokesperson of the White House comment on this, and they've been really strong. I haven't heard the president been asked or address any of this, and you know, would love to hear the President of the United States speak about the rise and the continuation of anti-Muslim bigotry, the demonization of Black immigrants, the demonization of Black people in this country. You know, we are humans. We matter. We are part and parcel of American society, and our lives should be valued, and our opinions should be valued as every other American.
So on that note, the president tweeted this picture from his State of the Union preparations ahead of tomorrow. You're bringing as your guest tomorrow the father of Amir Locke, the 22-year-old black man who was killed by police in his apartment during a no-knock raid. Are you hoping to see the president say something new, something bold about tackling police violence and how to stop it? Last year in his State of the Union, he was very keen to say we should be funding the police.
Well, what I'm hoping for is that the vicious, merciless beating and death of Tyree Nichols in Memphis brings about a new change and a new tone from the president. I hope that he is aspirational in what he wants us to do in Congress, and uses the bully pulpit to encourage us to come together to move an agenda that will keep everyone safe in this country. But I also hope that he announces what kind of tools might still be left within his power and the power of the executive order that he is willing to deploy, because certainly things have to change. You know,
Yeah, so there we have it, and she's going to continue to look more and more righteous, you know, to be honest with you. And Medhurst made a great point about not voting against the Israel lobby. You know, what can you do? But still, I still believe that she's a trailblazer, because there's been such an inadequate amount of voices like this. And it's just not proportionate to the population of the United States. So we're going to continue where we are here with Al-Aqsa.